Shaders and SFX in XR Applications Development course, Chapter 1, Part 1. At the successful completion of this day's training, learners will be able to identify and recognize the use of colors and lighting in Unity, differentiate between URP and HDRP pipeline to know when to use either one of them, create a URP scene project. Color and lighting are the vital element of any game. Sometimes it can just make a game unplayable, so paying attention to how you set up light is important. Let's watch a video discussing color and lighting in video games.
Hello everyone, today I'll be talking about the importance of color and lighting in games. The idea for this video came to mind after I viewed the Battle for Bikini Bottom pre-alpha, and yes, I grew up with the original, so I'm excited for this game. But some things threw me off, and the main things that caught my attention were the colors and lighting. So let's get into why this topic has importance. Now, color and lighting can set or enhance the mood or atmosphere of a game's location or entire world. Bright skies and standout colors can create a sense of vibrancy and adventure. You can make locations moody and warm with fiery colors and subtle lighting, or you can make a place feel ominous with muted colors and faint light sources. These two things can do a lot for a game's mood, but with that being said, I feel there's a certain balance that needs to be met for it to look good. You don't want to go overboard in any regard. In terms of color, it's dependent on the type of game, but you don't want to oversaturate your image because it'll feel like you're going through a fever dream more than playing a game. And you don't want to mute your colors too much in, let's say, a fantasy game, because it may seem a bit bland and dull to look at if it doesn't have a very stylistic approach. To this day, I still see people modding Skyrim with all sorts of E&B and lighting mods because, let's be honest, the game doesn't stand so well on its own visually. Although, to be fair, some of these mods can go over the edge at times. To conclude, the colors and lighting need to feel stable and easy on the eyes. A game that does a good job in my opinion is Wind Waker. It's vibrant but not oversaturated whatsoever, and it's not overly bright. It's really easy to look at. Now, I don't dislike the HD remaster, it looks really nice in some regards, although the lighting can go really overboard sometimes where it just bleeds into the image so profoundly that it'll burn your retinas, although there are times where the environmental details still look distinguishable and it's nice to look at. But personally, I find the original a lot more painless to view. Now the thing is, these are very toonish games. What about games with a more realistic to semi-realistic approach? Well, the Uncharted series does a really good job in terms of lighting and color in my opinion. It can set up very moody, cinematic, vibrant, and all sorts of different settings really well, and it's very pleasurable to view whether it's cutscenes or gameplay. Even other games like God of War are well done too. I can't think of many moments where the colors or lighting are over the top. They strike the right balance for me. Then there are some games that just go crazy with their lighting where it just washes out a good chunk of the environmental details. Like Monster Hunter World looks good at times, but then there are moments where it just goes mad with bright lighting and you can't appreciate the detail put into other aspects like colors, textures, models, and so on. Plus, it's so bright that it lacks a sense of contrast in some areas. Although there are some games with a specific problem where there's a lot of contrast but random objects begin to shine brightly. Like, damn, that's insane. Geralt's hair looks like a light source over here. See, it's moments like these where having a balance is important. Then there's some games where there isn't enough light. Now, having darkness in, let's say, a survival horror game is fine. The darkness can add a sense of helplessness and tension to the experience. But if I'm playing an action title, the last thing I want to deal with is pitch blackness. It creates less tension and more irritation, if anything. So yeah, it may be subject to personal preference, but I think anyone can agree that having a balance is beneficial in terms of color and lighting. These two things are pretty vital because they can set the mood or atmosphere of not only specific moments, but an entire experience. But going to extremes in either regard can be too much to take in depending on the type of game you're playing. Keep it balanced. Anyhow, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Peace.
How a game looks and feels more interesting for the user, going beyond just lighting in the environment. Let's watch a video discussing different art styles in video games.
Paintings, songs, a woman vomiting colors onto a canvas. What do all of these things have in common? They're all art, apparently. With quite literally 0 bar to entry, art can be found in anything, and conveniently enough, video games happen to fall under that category. So today, we're talking about art styles in video games. Now, There are many different kinds of art to be found in video games. Storytelling, music, level design, FPS, one-liners.
I ought to break a broom handle off in your ass.
But one of the more interesting categories one could talk about is the aesthetic, the presentation, the art style as people like to call it, and it's more important than you might think. I am of the belief that a lot of games live and die on their art styles before anyone has ever even tried them. I have friends that have refused to play Among Us or laughed at the notion of trying Undertale, some of the most popular and critically acclaimed games of the last decade, because of how they look. That's big. And although I would never go as far as to say that a game's art style would or should have any bearing on how much enjoyment you get out of it, I mean, people enjoyed Pong for a very long time, it does say a lot about the experience that you're likely to have. Take Wind Waker for instance. I remember when it came out back in the day, and almost everybody you talked to was like, bro, how are you gonna go from dark, moody, realistic graphics of Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask into this Fisher-Price Polly Pocket Easy Bake Oven looking shit right here? Are you kidding me? And the game turned out to be amazing. One of the most classic Zelda adventures, in my opinion. But it definitely did have a different vibe to it. A more whimsical, happy-go-lucky, feel-good Disney, but without all the weird sex jokes kind of vibe. It was pleasant, but also delightful. And because of that, it's linked to different memories in my head and elicits different emotional reactions, just as potent as any other Zelda game, but it was its own unique experience. And it expanded the Zelda franchise into an entirely different tonal category. That is the kind of power that art style can have. Taking a critically acclaimed game that everybody loves and reshaping it to fit different locations in our hearts and our minds. This can, however, backfire. It isn't always the easiest choice to change up the art style for a game, and if it isn't handled with tact and care and at least a little bit of lube for your fan base, you can your franchise up big time. For instance, Diablo, perfect example of not enough lube. Diablo was the godfather of the dungeon dive. The first two games are revered as some of the greatest games to ever exist inside the genre, with their dark, gruesome, foreboding atmosphere walking through the ancient, long-forgotten halls of dark towers soaked in the blood of devious satanic rituals. And then the third game came out, and oh boy, the art style went from this to this. It irrevocably changed almost everything that people enjoyed about the first two. It took the immersive, dark atmosphere of a truly gritty dungeon dive and turned it into a colorful, cartoonish spectacle of a light show. A mobile game brought to the PC. Exactly the kind of shit that PC gamers love.
Do you guys not have phones?
Yeah, you guys all have phones, right?
Needless to say, they altered the art style too much and ruined the experience that many people were hoping for. They tarnished the memory and legacy of a game that held such a high position in people's hearts. Blizzard seems to be really good at doing this for some reason. And don't get me wrong, I actually don't mind Diablo 3 or Retail WoW. They're pretty fun games, but they just don't have that special essence anymore. You know, the magic, the flavor, it's gone. And that is the flip side of the power of art style. Whether for good or for bad, it can change the essence of a game. It can massively alter people's perception and experience. It can enhance or ruin entire franchises. It's an immense thing to wield. That's what she said. But aside from that, I think that one of the coolest parts of a video game's art style is that it's an interesting window into a creator's mind and a true artistic expression of oneself. It's like music, you know, there are so many good artists out there, but the thing that really makes them great is that they're all different. That with each new song, from each new person or band, you get to see an entirely different side to reality. You get to live in someone else's shoes for a moment and experience their life and vision in the very unique way that they want you to see it in. And it's the same for video games. Take Cuphead, for example, a game with one of my favorite art styles ever. So much care and attention to detail went into this game. They drew every frame by hand, dude. Like, look at this. I can barely work up the energy to sit down and write a 2-page script, okay? This shit blows my mind with the old 1930s aesthetic, complete with the watercolor background and the old-timey big band music to boot. It's just beautiful. And underneath it, all the mechanics could be of a simple Contra-style platformer, but the care and love that went into it, the uncompromising vision, it just seeps through into your brain like a deadly, invasive virus that just makes you feel things. Ugh. Superhot is another one. I've talked about it before, but the minimalistic magic on display here is astounding, and it just makes for probably one of the most addictive game experiences I've ever had. Murder House, a game that I'm probably gonna be doing a video on soon. Old PS1 era graphics fed through the lost VHS footage style of old exploitation horror films, and everything combined, it gives the horror aspect of the game so much more effect. I have never come closer to shitting my pants than when playing this game. Art styles in video games are like a window into another person's mind, especially given the huge rise in indie gaming as of late. I mean, we're seeing some of the most exciting, interesting, idiosyncratic titles in a long time. I mean, imagine that the only kind of games that you could ever play for the rest of your lives were just better and better iterations of Call of Duty or Assassin's Creed, just continuing on the hyper-realism train until games were just indistinguishable from reality. I don't want that. I want to escape reality. Reality sucks, and unique, interesting art styles are a doorway into fantastical new worlds. There's a lot of them too. Video games have been a thing for decades at this point, so there's tons of inspirational artistic material to look at. Parappa the Rapper, Katamari Damacy, Jet Set Radio, Okami, Journey, Wind Waker, Minecraft 13, Killer 7, Cuphead, Apo, Oberdin, and so many more games that I don't really rightly have the time to mention, to be completely honest, or this video is going to be super fucking long. But I urge you to try out just a few of the games that I've listed here. They are pretty good. All in all, a video game's art style is a powerful tool. It can make shit, it can break shit, and it can open your mind to new and interesting experiences. It's definitely one of the most fascinating aspects of video games for me, and I think that it's something that you should open up to a little more as well, assuming that you haven't. It's definitely worth the effort. But that about wraps up the video, ladies and gentlemen. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you all in the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Love ya. Bye-bye.
It can be hard to choose between using HDRP and URP, or the High Definition Render Pipeline and the Universal Render Pipeline. URP, Universal Render Pipeline. 1. Designed to be versatile and performance across a wide range of platforms, from mobile and web to consoles and PCs. 2. Prioritizes scalability and efficiency. Offers a good balance between visual quality and performance. HDRP, High Definition Render Pipeline. 1. Targeted towards high-end PCs and consoles. 2. Focuses on achieving photorealistic visuals. 3. Demands more powerful hardware. Let's watch a video discussing differences between URP and HDRP.
Before, when creating a new Unity project, you got to choose between 2D and 3D. However, some of you might have noticed that we now have two new templates to choose between. I'm of course talking about the High Definition template and the Universal template. These two templates take advantage of Unity's new scriptable render pipeline, and Unity is working towards making them the new standard. And new features such as shader graph and visual effects graph are being built specifically for these templates, which is kind of important. So let's have a look at what these templates are, why they're so much better than the old default ones, and most importantly, answer the question, which one should you choose? But first, this video is sponsored by Millinode. Millinode is a free tool for organizing your creative projects into free-form visual boards. It can be used for any creative project, but it's particularly well suited to the early stages of game development. I think we all know that can get pretty messy. They've recently updated their whole template workflow, which makes Millinode extremely smooth to work with when planning a project. Also, they just added dark mode. Woohoo! We actually used Millinode in one of our videos when creating a turn-based battle system. It was very convenient to pick up and made the planning process a lot smoother. So if you want to have a look at Millinode in action, definitely check out that video. And finally, Millinode is free, so get organized now by simply clicking the link in the description. So, which template should you choose? Well, if you're creating a 2D game, use Universal. Thanks to all of the awesome Patreon supporters okay, there might be a bit more to it than that, but to answer this question properly, we first have to look at what SRP is. Well, the current default renderer, also called the built-in renderer, is a general purpose renderer. This means that it was made to fit as many types of use cases as possible. However, because it tries to do everything at once, it can't offer the best possible graphics features, and it can't be optimized for your particular needs. To solve this problem, Unity built an entirely new rendering system, SRP, or the Scriptable Render Pipeline. SRP is Unity's new modular rendering system. If you're a graphics engineer, this means that you can customize the render loop in Unity via C# scripts, which is pretty advanced. But for us mortals, this just means that Unity now has more graphics capabilities and that we get to choose exactly what type of graphics fit our game. But creating your own render pipeline quickly becomes very programming heavy. Luckily, Unity has made 2 predefined pipelines that cover pretty much all of our needs, and we can use them without getting too technical. These 2 render pipelines focus on different aspects of graphical fidelity, and therefore each one targets a specific set of use cases. And these are of course the ones that we get to choose between when creating a new project. The High Definition Render Pipeline, or HDRP, and the Universal Render Pipeline, or URP. And fear not, if you're already working on a project using the built-in renderer, we'll have a link in the description to a guide that shows you how to port everything over to the new templates. So now that we know what SRP is, what render pipeline should you choose? Well, let's start with HDRP. HDRP targets only high-end hardware, like PC, Xbox, and PlayStation. HDRP is meant for really high-fidelity games, graphics demos, architectural renders, and pretty much anything that just requires the best possible graphics. This is not to say that HDRP isn't performant. It's still way faster than the built-in renderer when targeting high-end graphics. But if you're just making a low-poly stylized game, rendering everything with AAA graphics techniques might be a bit overkill. Of course, HDRP can create some amazingly beautiful scenes, but it also requires so much more work. To fully utilize all the power that HDRP has to offer, you have to create dozens, if not hundreds, of texture maps. Height maps, metallic maps, smoothness maps, AO maps, detail maps, normal maps, and so on. The list goes on. And this is for each of your materials. So creating assets for HDRP can take a long time. This means that the usual HDRP project requires a bigger team and therefore a much bigger budget. In fact, I would say that unless you're a graphics engineer, if your team is smaller than 5 people, HDRP probably isn't the right choice for you. Which of course leads us to URP. URP is, as the name suggests, the go-to render pipeline. It's designed to run on any platform with great performance. So unless you have specific graphics needs that only HDRP or a custom render pipeline supports, chances you're good to go with URP. Whether you're targeting mobile, consoles, web, or PC, URP is just a great choice for performant rendering. And at this point in time, URP actually does a lot. It has many of the same features as HDRP, but stripped down to make it more performant on all platforms. This, however, doesn't mean that you can't create beautiful games with URP. On this channel, we often talk about the difference between graphics and aesthetics. Graphics refers to the actual rendering, while aesthetics refers to the art style and art direction. And I would argue any day that aesthetics are so much more important to making a game look good than graphics. In fact, I think we see countless examples of games with a fairly low graphical quality, which are still incredibly beautiful because of the great art choices. That being said, however, it's good to know exactly what the different render pipelines have to offer. So let's break it down. So first of all, Shader Graph and Visual Effects Graph are now fully verified for both pipelines. This is great because both are awesome tools for artists creating shaders or particle effects. If you want to learn how to use them, we of course have videos on both. Also, if you're making a VR game, this can actually be done with both pipelines. However, realistically, VR with HDRP might get really performance heavy, since Unity is essentially rendering everything twice, one for each eye. Deferred rendering, though, is currently only available in HDRP. However, it's currently in research phase on the URP roadmap. The same applies to decals, which is a handy way of spicing up your levels by overlaying textures. Now, one of the biggest differences between the two pipelines is lighting. HDRP offers way more advanced lighting features, such as real-time global illumination, which simulates bounce lighting, volumetric lighting, which simulates light passing through particles in the air, and the big one, ray tracing, which is a whole new way of rendering light, reflections, and shadows. Ray tracing works by tracing the path of light as it bounces around your scene, and simulates the way that light interacts with objects in real life. This technique is definitely very performance heavy, but it creates the most realistic results, which is why it's been used by movie studios for ages to create pre-rendered images. Another thing that is very different though is shaders. HDRP offers high-end shader features like height, detail, and parallax maps, which are used for displacement, detail, and simulation of depth in materials. It also has subsurface scattering, which simulates light passing through thin objects like cloth or skin. And it features advanced shaders like the Stack Lit shader, which allows you to use multiple material features like subsurface scattering, iridescence, anisotropy, and hazy parametrization at the same time. When it comes to post-processing, both render pipelines offer pretty much the same. The most important things that you only get with HDRP are ambient occlusion, which creates shadows in the places where two surfaces intersect, auto exposure, which simulates the human's eye's ability to adapt to different lighting conditions, and screen space reflections, which simulates reflections based on what's visible on the screen. I should mention that ambient occlusion, however, is on its way to URP. But HDRP doesn't get to have all the fun. One thing that is only available in URP is 2D lighting and shadows. Again, if you're working in 2D, URP is the choice for you. Another cool feature that is now available in both pipelines is camera stacking. This allows you to render from multiple cameras at once. For example, you can separate your environment, FPS weapons, and UI into different cameras, which can have some cool benefits, such as your hands and weapons not clipping through walls. Also, physical cameras are available for both render pipelines as well. Whew. I know that was a lot of information, but I hope that you feel better equipped now to choose the right render pipeline for you.
In this tutorial, we explore the process of setting up lighting in Unity's Universal Render Pipeline, URP. This tutorial encourages viewers to experiment with settings to achieve their desired atmosphere. The session emphasizes the importance of post-processing effects to enrich visual quality. We encourage viewers to personalize their settings as every scene is unique. Let's watch a video demonstrating creating a URP basic scene in Unity.
This time I have opened up an empty Unity project.
Let's reflect on what we have learned so far.